do, so he has enough time.
Anyway, good, huh? Because he went Florida, he went to Tampa, the day the game. I said, we were just in Tampa. And then
I'm the only one who doesn't go away.
And then the one before that, he was in,
Oh, yeah, you remember April.
yeah.
What did you just ask me? Oh, so I sent something back to the law department because they wanted the vendor to include City of Providence as they wanted their case.
I drafted something
I
for
don't
Jeff
know.
today. Okay, I put it in.
I don't know what they could
Specifically
possibly
one
do
of them.
that they would
Just see what Jeff said. Yeah, like.
So that was an issue. They, I put in the money and in my letter, I said, but if it exceeds this amount, we don't have funding available. They capped the amount. Now she came back and said, if I do, I can't promise I can do it for that amount. And I said, don't worry about it. I said, I don't know. I think they will delay it until. That's just fine. I think they can delay it.
Okay.
If not, it's not right. It's enough to get in there. No bad. This is should not get approved tonight.
I'll tell that, please.
Well, I drafted something. Can you send it?
Here's a note one.
So. I just might not.
I never done it.
I always no one's towing 9 times.
Yeah, it's like, I have no problem. I'll get it to you. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Councilwoman Helen Anthony, and I am convening the regular meeting of the Committee on Finance, Monday, April 3rd at 4:02. And I thank you all very much for your flexibility in terms of having our meeting on a Monday afternoon. We usually meet on Tuesdays at 5:30, but I was not well last week, and I just really appreciate all of your patience and your flexibility. Today, I would like to recognize Councilman Don Saltz, who just joined us, Kenny Sheverini, we've got Julie Blanco, we've got Donna Division, we've got Gina Costa, all with us today, and we call the roll, please.
Chairwoman Helen D'Antoni.
Present.
Vice Chairman Juan Pichardo.
Present.
Councilman James Taylor.
Here.
Councilor Sue Endelbrock. Here. Councilor Miguel Sanchez.
Here.
We have 5 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you kindly read agenda item number 1?
Item number 1, communication from His Honor the Mayor dated March 1st, 2023, informing the honorary members of the City Council that pursuing Section 302B of the Providence Home Rule Charter of 1980, as amended Section 8 through 13 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Providence and Public Law Chapter 4550, Sections 1 through 31, passed in 1987, he is this day appointing Maria F. Deaton, Esquire, of 188 Benefit Street, Providence, Rhode Island, 02906, as an Associate Justice of the Providence Housing Court for a term to expire on January 2nd, 2026, and respectfully submits the same for your approval. Ms. Deaton replaced Mr. Garcia, whose term has expired.
Wonderful. Attorney Deaton, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the table and being sworn in. Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
And please state your name for the record.
Maria Deaton. Wonderful. Have a seat right at the end if you wouldn't mind so we can all see.
Oh,
you. Sorry. No worries. So I really appreciate you coming this afternoon. I was wondering if you could just start by giving us just a little bit of an overview of your background and also to tell us why it is you want to serve in this capacity.
Okay, great, thanks. So as you know, my name is Maria Deacon, Maria Farrell Deacon. I am Cape Verdean. I came to this country I'm the youngest of 6. So I have 4 older brothers. I had an older sister who unfortunately passed a year ago due to COVID. My family and I came to this country in 1975. I was 5 years old. We settled in East Providence where I lived up until I graduated from college and then eventually moved back to. I have 2 beautiful daughters who are 23 and 21 years old. My oldest daughter graduated from college. She is in Los Angeles. And my youngest daughter is a junior in UMass Amherst. When my youngest graduated from high school, I moved to Providence. So I've been in Providence for about 3 years and loving it. I love it so much. I love living on the east side, such a great place to live. And I'm really, I think 50 is a new 20. I'm really enjoying it. I don't tell my kids this, but everyone asks me, what it's like to be an empty nester. Do I miss the kids? I'm like, I miss the kids, but I'm loving it. I wouldn't change it for a thing in the world. So I'm in private practice. I started my career off as kind of a weird fact, but the first bar I took was the state of Arizona. So after I graduated from law school, I got engaged, and my husband was in the Marine Corps and stationed in Yuma, Arizona. So that was the first bar I took. I took the bar, hung up my own shingle, and practiced on my own for 3 years, which was such a great experience that I think gave me the foundation for doing everything I did since then. After that, I went to the district attorney's office in Massachusetts, where I was part of a federal grant for bilingual speaking individuals helping the community through the domestic violence program that they had at the district attorney's office. So I did that for a number of years until I had my kids and it was getting tough commuting. So I then took the Rhode Island bar and started working at the Rhode Island Attorney General's office, where I was hired by Patrick Lynch and worked there for about 7 years. And when Patrick Lynch became term limited, he asked myself and a couple other prosecutors if we would be interested in starting a firm, and we did. And that's where I've been since. And I think that was in 2011. My primary practice is criminal defense. But I also do, I'd say that's about 75–80% of my practice, and the remaining is civil, miscellaneous civil matters. So it could be anywhere from landlord tenant to restraining orders, probate. I'm currently the probate court judge in East Providence, so I've done that for about 5 years. And that is my life in a nutshell. It's a lot to soak in.
And you're interested in the housing court?
I am interested in the housing court. So one of the things, I'm excited for the new administration. I'm excited because now I want to assimilate into the community. I'm in Providence now, and I'm trying to get to know members of the community. And one of the things that I've always said about judges and especially judges, I should say, and lawyers, is experience. That's what matters. And I think that especially lately, the communities has been very divided, and people just don't understand each other, don't listen to each other. One of the things that I think I say is always true, that I heard when I was in law school, it was from Oliver Wendell Holmes, and he said, "The life of the law is experience and not logic." And that makes so much sense if you think about it, because where judges sit and try to decide cases, judges have a lot of discretion. There are some areas that they don't have discretion, but when you're making decisions about a person's life and you haven't lived that life and you haven't lived or experienced certain things, I think it impacts the community and how the community sees their access to justice or access to the courts and how the court can rule on something they have no idea about. I found that in my, having done both criminal prosecution and defense, is individuals just want to know that they're being heard. They just want to be listened to. And I think that that's what the kind of energy I would like to bring into the housing court, based on my experience collectively, my diverse experience, as well as my diversity of background. And I think it would be a great asset for the city. I hope.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was really excellent. So I'm going to open it up first to the committee members. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Go ahead, no, pro tem, please. Pro tem. Okay. Councilor.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. We chatted a few weeks ago, and I was just so impressed and so excited that you're here and that you'll be serving the city in this way. So I just wanted to say that out loud, and, you know, welcome aboard. So thank you.
Councilor Pichardo.
Thank you. So thank you for returning back to Rhode Island and especially Providence. Great resume and experience. So just a couple of questions and perhaps even from the administration. I noticed that the appointment is only to 2026. So it's only, yeah, that's 4 years. Right?
Is there anyone here from the administration that
Is
can
that-
answer that, or can you, do you know why it is a short term? Anyone? Or is that typically
Three-year
the
term.
regular term? Okay.
3-year term. And then you also mentioned that are you currently the probate judge in East Providence? Obviously, being new to this, can you align me or someone align me, can you hold both? In other cities, like a judgeship?
All right, do we have, that would be a solicitor.
Just for my.
I'm not aware of any prohibition, provided that the matters in probate and the matters in East Providence probate and Providence Housing Court would overlap. I think that may be problematic, but I mean, we can certainly look at it. I'm not aware of anything that jumps out at me that would be a conflict that would prevent her from serving, unless you know something off the top of your head.
I can say, as I indicated, this is going into my 6th year of probate court. I've never had an issue with housing court, whether in East Providence or in any other municipality in the states.
So I will ask one follow-up, if you would allow me to ask. So in terms of scheduling, how does that work? Or what kind of schedule do you have?
In probate court, we meet twice a month, and it's Tuesday afternoons.
What would be the schedule for the housing court?
For the housing court, I did speak with Judge Iglesias. I think my day would be Wednesdays afternoon.
So that's one afternoon a month,
No, once a week.
once a week. Okay. All right, I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilor Richard.
And I just want to be clear in this, it just popped up as you mentioned it, not questioning whether you fit for the position and obviously you understand it. It was just also for just clarity in terms of not being too familiar with a lot of the laws that can you serve, both city municipal judgeship, that's all. That's all.
Legitimate
All
question.
right.
And I might ask the city solicitor, the assistant city solicitor to report back.
Yes, certainly, we will review that, but off the top of my head, I don't see anything. If I obviously it would be problematic if it was both in Providence.
Yeah.
Obviously, there would be some type of conflict, but I don't see any, but we will certainly look to see if there's any statute or judicial canon that prohibits someone being appointed to a judgeship, part-time, and I'll report back.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Go ahead.
Thank you,
Councilor
Chairwoman.
Sanchez.
And thanks, Maria, for being willing to serve. We spoke a little bit, and you touched on it on your opening remarks in terms of experience with housing related matters. Can you touch a little bit more on that, like what type of experience you have that would be able to fit this position?
Well, housing related, just specific to housing related matters or?
Well, yeah, because I mean, what I'm trying to understand, is, so this is a housing court appointment, and it looks like most of your background is in criminal defense or criminal matters, so I just want, you said you have a little bit experience in housing related matters?
So, especially now as a defense attorney, I'll go back to when I first started, in Arizona, I represented all, in all types of areas of the law, all types of cases. My primary practice in Arizona was not criminal. But now as a criminal defense attorney, a lot of my clients I do what's called court appointed work, where I represent on behalf of the courts, indigent clients. So if they cannot afford an attorney and there's a conflict with the public defender's office, I will represent them. A lot of those clients will need assistance. Sometimes they're suffering from a eviction notice, or they have issues where the housing where they're living at this moment, where there's ordinance violation, landlord tenant is not compliant with the ordinance. So that would be the extent of my experience, is either representing clients in the district and superior court regarding evictions, as well as dealing directly with landlords or owners of homes regarding violations of ordinances.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councilor Gonzalez?
No, I just want to thank you for your service and for serving in this capacity. And as a fellow Cape Verdean, I just want to say that I have an affinity there, and thank you for all that you do.
And I would just, again, thank you very much. Your, first of all, you're continuing with School of Law. I did also.
There we go. Lots of connections
And
here.
then you were at the University of Missouri. I was out in Columbia, Missouri.
Oh, yeah.
As a city planning and zoning and also city councilor. So you check two of those boxes. And then I think your lived experience is exactly what's needed here. I really, really appreciate your willingness to serve in the capacity that you're going to serve. And, I look forward to supporting you in any way we can.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Great. And with that, may I have a motion?
I'd like to make the motion that we approve.
I'll second.
Okay, the motion was made by Councilor Taylor, seconded by Councilor Vanderbilt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Congratulations.
Congratulations. So Attorney Dean, this will be referred to the city council.
Okay.
Put on, I believe it would be on Thursdays for a vote. And so I just wanted to let you know that. But I thank you so much for
Well, thank you so much, everyone, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. I like to talk. Thank you.
All right. Madam Clerk, would you read agenda item number 2?
Item number 2, communication from His Honor the Mayor dated March 6, 2023, informing the honorary members of the City Council that pursuant to sections 302B and 1012 of the Providence Home Rule Charter of 1980, as amended and Public Law, Chapter 4550, Sections 1 through 31st, passed in 1987, he is this day appointing Joseph I. Mulligan, 3 of 679 Washington Street, Brighton, Massachusetts, 02135, to the position of Director of the Department of Planning and Development, and respectfully submits the same for your approval.
Thank you. And before we go any further, I'd like to say welcome to Councilor Anna Vargas, who joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Morgan, please step up and we'll swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. You swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
I do.
And please state the full name for the record again.
Joseph I. Mulligan III.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start just by asking you to give us a brief overview of your work history and what brought you to Providence, and why you might want to serve in this capacity here.
Great, thank
I'm trained as an architect and a planner, and had gone to night school for architecture for 6.5 years. And during that time, concurrent work program and work in the private sector, a traditional architect's office environment, and got a chance to get a toehold into government and worked in an agency that was responsible for maintaining industrial and light manufacturing and maritime industry in Boston, including preserving that type of jobs. They merged eventually with the redevelopment authority, so my responsibility became much more complex and more in nature. Have jumped back and forth to the private sector, working particularly in the nonprofit sector, assisting startups or existing nonprofits to match their program with their real estate needs and their programmatic activities. And then had a chance to work for a state agency that provides capacity to post-industrial cities to go into places that were severely deficient in capacity and were in socioeconomic distress, and to bring in planning, development, and other types of initiatives, whatever it might be, with arts and culture, or whoever would champion initiatives within those communities and try to breathe some air into their ideas and bring these to the forefront and implement them. Then had the chance to work in the transit industry with the MTA, and worked in the transit-oriented development initiative, which was really a startup within a transportation agency to be facing liaison between the development community throughout the Massachusetts Bay Area, including down here to the Rhode Island border. And had an opportunity that I learned that Mayor Snyder was looking for talent and looking for opportunities to fill out his leadership positions, and jumped at the opportunity by seeing that just about, I would say, much of my professional career, I think, led up to this opportunity to work in a community that has a similar context on the waterfront, historic, cultural assets, state and competent institutional actors, as well as a large community of neighborhoods that have various stages of economic opportunity and access to prosperity or housing, and to be able to work on those initiatives to bring additional capacity, not only to the neighborhoods, but to other parts of the city, I think is for somebody in my position with experience and training is really an ideal situation. And I'm very happy for the opportunity, and I'm very excited to get started in that.
Thank you. I'd just like to start by just asking a few questions. So in your role as planning director, what have you, I'm sure you have goals. I'm sure the mayor has discussed what his goals are for you in this capacity. Could you share some of that with us?
Sure. There's been multiple planning initiatives that have occurred in the previous administration, and some of those require additional steps. So we've reviewed many of those plans, but I think more succinctly is that the city is about to enter their next phase of comprehensive planning initiative. So we're spending a good amount of time on pulling together the staff and identifying resources and schedule, and identifying stakeholders and locations where we can implement the rollout of that comprehensive plan. We're fortunate to have, as the way the mayor is structured his organization, that we're having close contact with the Arts and Culture Department, with inspection services, with workforce group, as well as working with public property and all the other departments, so that we have, I think, a real comprehensive and strategic approach to initiating that comprehensive plan, so that we can bring all the resources of the city to bear on that, as well as spend.
So I'm just going to follow up on that. I just wanted to know who's steering that process. Is it you? I'd like to know a little more. I'm just looking for the context and the reporting structure. So in other words, I'd like to talk about who you report to. I understand it's the Director of Economic Development. So are you spearheading these initiatives, or are you working as part of the team?
Well, the responsibility for the comprehensive plan resides in planning and development. The economic development director, I would kind of categorize as an umbrella responsibility for multiple departments. Senator Thomas has certainly been engaged. We find her an excellent asset to the initiative. She brings a wide view approach to municipal organization and development. She has good contacts within the federal government, which has been helpful, as well as I think what's going to be helpful in the comprehensive plan is that we are by structural organization, we are working outside of silos and working departmentally so that we get the best ideas and resources and attention from the different departments that can be bring bear to, I think, a more comprehensive plan. So it'll be infused with better ideas and better resources will be identified so that we can take that plan and find ways to implement it effectively as it develops and comes to fruition.
Have you been involved in a comprehensive plan process before?
I have, yeah, Lynn was a part of their comprehensive planning initiative, and the role that I played as a transformative development initiative fellow was integrated into the plan, as well as I resided in plan developed and organized. So participated in that organization of it and contribute to it as one of the municipal goals.
Okay, so you did the implementation of the plan. Were you?
No, it was the development of the comprehensive plan, but my work moved forward through the planning process into the implementation, kind of the vision frame, but then also moved along through the implementation. We call it an action plan.
Can you tell me about the community engagement portion of the that comprehensive plan process that you engaged in Lynn?
So we had additional capacity with a consulting firm that was able to come in, and my area was specifically for the downtown area of Lynn, and we had a community involvement. I think we probably had some of the largest participation in the city's history that came out for the event. They were very proactive and engaged. They weren't passive exercises. They involved community participation. We actually put out plans and maps and had the residents and stakeholders come and identify their concerns. We prioritize those as key initiatives that we wanted to figure out how we could place into the larger context of the comprehensive plan, but also to identify early action items that we could then move into implementation. Primarily involved issues surrounding safety and pedestrian safety. And we then identified medium-term goals that we could put on a bit of a longer-term time schedule, as well as identifying longer-term kind of bold visioning concepts that we then found ways to set those ships afloat or to tuck them into other programs that had a longer view perspective related to planning and development of that community.
And just thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then how?
We also mentioned Lynn, about a decade before I arrived, that eliminated its planning department due to a cost savings measure. So they were absent any type of planning capacity, centralizing the city's funds for 4 years effectively their planning capacity. It's a city of about 100,000.
Okay. And then how long were you in Lynn?
4 years.
4 years. Okay. Okay, other than Lynn, your 4 years at Lynn, and it looks to me, I know you have significant experience, and we very much appreciate your skill set. I'm more interested in the planning portion, and I know that when we met originally, you said you were more of a builder than a planner. So what other planning experience? I mean, I know you do transit-oriented development and things like that. But in terms of planning department for a municipality, do you have other experience?
Yeah, sure. I worked for over a decade in the, it was then called the Boston Development Authority. It's now the Boston Planning and Development Authority. I look at planning and development as really kind of two hands moving forward to progress and implementation. I was involved in the redevelopment authority on lots of localized planning initiatives. I managed oversight for planning and development within their property holdings. They were largely military bases, former military bases that were being converted. So a lot of planning for hundreds of acres of area that then they were active. They were occupied by businesses, by industries, by workforces. And another instance, I managed the city public facilities department. And part of that was responsible for the planning and the design and the development of all the city's property. So we're involved in multi-year capital improvement plans. So making sure that monies were distributed across the city for their physical resources. And we had to ensure that those resources matched the demographic and neighborhood needs and requirements. So it was a response to other layers of planning that then were supplemented by additional planning for pretty much taking plans into action so that we realized what the neighborhoods and what the residents, their hopes and desires were, and then find ways to translate that into concrete scale and fixed elements within the built environment.
And can you talk about, I'm sorry. I just have a, I'm sorry, I just had some questions that I wanted to answer. So I just am interested in the public engagement process around those, what you just specifically. So how were you, intimately involved with the public engagement processes around those planning that you just, and can you talk specifically about how you were involved in the public engagement process? Making sure that all the stakeholders are at the table and making sure that, more importantly, that all the communities that have been impacted were listened to.
Yeah, I mean, I can, in most occasions, I was the person in front of the room managing that process, either introducing the consultants or guiding the process, but I would be the point person for those initiatives. Maybe one of the more relevant ones was my work in Roxbury with the Dudley Master Oversight Committee. And for about 6.5 years, I met in that community. It was a community of color that had a lot of socioeconomic distress, and the then mayor had made a desire to put a lot of resources in that community to fulfill some commitments that had been made for generations that had not come to fruition. So we went through a pretty intensive planning process to identify the needs for the community. I was at those meetings and evenings at least once or twice a month for 6.5 years, working closely with that committee. I was involved in stakeholders and community members. That led to the planning and development of one of the largest public works projects in City of Boston's modern era, following the development of the plaza and the City Hall. That was $110 million for one building alone. Actually, I think by the time we finished that planning and development process, we committed nearly $250 million to that time. It involved the development of a branch library, a police station, a municipal building that housed the school department, as well as other municipal agencies. We planned roadway infrastructure and concurrently with the Water and Sewer Commission to replace all the utilities. So, and as well as the first purpose-built charter school, we believe, in the country for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, the Dearborn School. We noted that as we led to the development and the implementation of those buildings, I mentioned the Bowman building, the Dearborn building, were then recognized by the Boston Society of Architects as two of the most beautiful buildings and structures built within the last decade in the city of Boston. So not only to do the planning process with the community and identify their concerns, but find the resources, identify the opportunities to move that towards implementation, not just to build it, but to make them as beautiful as possible.
Wonderful. Before I open it up, I want to say thank you to Councilor Graves, who just had some no worries. I really appreciate it. And it's nice to have you here. So I'm going to open it up to, oh, I'm sorry. And Councilor Peterson, sorry, you should come right up to the table. That's okay. I mean, thank you so much for coming. All right. I am now going to open it up to the committee members for any questions or comments.
So first of all, Joe, thanks for coming in front of us. I know I met with you one-on-one before. You have an impressive resume. But one of the things I'm happy to hear about is that you dealt with, I know we talked about, you didn't talk about it, but there's the fire guys behind you. You talked about how you restructured some of the fire stations up in Boston to make them up to code and everything that should be. So I figured you'd plug that in, especially those guys behind me. But I would hope that you, no, seriously, I would hope that you would work with the fire department. I know I've talked to you and the chief about this, the $400 million out there for the
Resiliency.
yeah, and there's a 750 that they're working on now for the update of fire stations. And as you know, or may not know, a lot of our fire stations, we only have 12 now, but they are in needs of a lot of help. And also, I was glad to hear that you've worked with the other department, Lynn and whatever it was, I forgot. What? Lynn, that you worked with them to say about with their city-owned buildings. Because as you know, we talk about planning and development, which is nice for, you know, to try to get a bunch of businesses and stuff in the city, but our own buildings are falling apart, including our school department. The Pro Tem has a what you call it, rec center, community center that's been closed for God knows how long, 5 years, 4 years, and it's a mess and needs a lot of work. So I'm glad to hear that. Hopefully you can work with, you know, the council, with the chiefs, with the other director heads, and work on getting those buildings up to par, you know, before we go into all the other stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. And I should mention, we met with John Martin, and I've also met with the Public Building Authority representatives, and we're creating kind of a working group among those who have responsibility for built assets within Providence. And so it's very collegial, very cooperative in terms of exchanging ideas and expertise in these areas. I think that DPW is about to start an initiative for their facilities. And I know many of the challenges we've confronted with fire stations that city like Providence, when they originally built, they were housing horses and horse-drawn equipment, and there's a conflict with the modern apparatus that goes in there. So all the issues we have to do with dropping slabs or raising roofs and
Making sure the doors are open. But no, I thank you for that. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Questions? Committee members? Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Joe, for coming and willing to serve. I have a couple questions. The first one is in terms of planning experience. You've mentioned Lynn, a little bit of Roxbury. Could you give us any specifics on planning experience in low income or working class neighborhoods? I know in Lynn, you referenced the downtown district. Did you work on any other planning throughout the city of Lynn or Roxbury?
Well, the initiative in Lynn specifically was focused on the downtown area. It's good to know that downtown area contained 30% of the municipality's affordable low-income housing. So what we were able to do was to bring additional development to that area that included a new initiative that the state had on workforce housing, low-income housing, and market rate housing, and to combine those elements into one building. So we're working on that so that you have a good cross-fertilization of different strata. The work in Roxbury was very broad-based all across that community, the education aspects, the municipal infrastructure. working in communities that, in addition to Lynn, one of the challenges is getting participation from members of that community, particularly in areas that have great distrust to government or come from countries in which the government would be somebody who would take your husband or your sons away and never be seen again. So we were trying to find ways that we could reach out to those stakeholders. And one of the strategies we used was actually going to the churches. They were very, people felt that was a comfortable space, so we would engage with the pastors to avail ourselves of their facilities, to have community meetings within those places. We did a lot of outreach in the community. Lynn, it was a city in transition, and the powers that be had not really done enough outreach to communities that didn't speak English. So we did a lot of work on translating our documents, to having translators at our meeting to make sure that the communication was strong, not only to kind of the native English speakers, but to the newcomers, that they felt welcome, that they could participate because it was being done in their native language. We also reached out, I find the most open to engagement are youth and students. So we had special stakeholder meetings just with youth and stakeholders. We did that with local community arts organizations, local arts and cultural organizations, theater groups, as well as straight engagements with school children. Have them come in as part of a community process, and had special workshops with them to identify what their concerns are. The best thing about working with kids is there's no filter. They tell you straight up. And that was very satisfying. So working, I would say meeting people where they are, rather than saying, we're having this meeting here at this place, be there at whatever time, and that's your chance to speak. It's really rolling up your sleeves and finding multiple occasions so that you can find common ground with different stakeholders at different opportunities within places where they feel the most comfortable. And I hope that process would be continuing working in this community, that we're out in the neighborhoods and we're places where, whether neutral territory or places where people feel that they can express themselves freely and to attend and participate and not feel intimidated or not feel that their voice wouldn't be heard.
Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead. If you have another.
And then, I mean, my second question, slash comment really, because I think we all need to play an important role in the solution, is in terms of affordability. Providence, in my opinion, used to be a pretty affordable city compared to some of the other major cities close to us. But on a daily or weekly basis, I'm hearing rents tripling, doubling, going on super high. So I mean, in your opinion, your perspective, what can planning and Department of Planning and Development for the city do to combat some of the high rent increases that we're seeing?
As a current renter in Providence, I can attest to what you've heard for rents. I was a bit taken aback when I started to look at what was out there in the marketplace. They're getting very close to Boston prices. And from my perspective, the increasing the supply of units is got to be the prime strategy. A lot of this is simply supply and demand. There's other complexities and other issues that are coming in, notwithstanding the current global economic conditions that are occurring with interest rates and cost of materials and goods. But what we're seeing now at the redevelopment agency, as well as the calls to our office and where I've spent most of my focus in the last 4 weeks as I've been here, have been meeting with the community development corporations, meeting with the different housing advocacy groups, and looking for opportunities to bring more resources that we have. There's the housing trust monies, there's other federal monies, the community development block grants, which are now being distributed. So it's matching financial resources. I think we need to, and we are getting better on identifying where the opportunities are for development, vacant lots, other properties, that those kind of prime leverages that you can use to reduce the overall housing costs. We can't make people build them for cheaper. We can't use cheaper materials. So we have to get to the other legs of the stool that support affordable and low income housing. It's going to be a struggle. It's a struggle in every city. It's a global phenomenon. And I would hope that because of the talent and the resources that Providence has been able to bear, that we'll be able to tell a very good story in a few years about how we were able to get ahead of, I would argue, being a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of production for units in the community, using the tools of zoning to either increase density, reduce parking requirements, and find that balance between using what resources we have here at City Hall versus what we can match in the marketplace.
Can I just respond?
Yes. go
Thank
right
you.
ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you mentioned the zoning and parking minimums, because I think those are big barriers to new development. Because everyone knows that housing stock is the main issue of our extreme prices right now. So what I'm more interested is in the conversations of finding solutions to increase our land opportunities that's able to be developed on. So the last thing I just wanted to confirm, I think you mentioned earlier, you are going to be leading the comp plan for the city as the new director of planning and development.
Through the planning development department.
Thank you.
With our staff.
Great, Councilor Ranger.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you for being here, Joe, and making your time today. I just had a few quick questions. Thank you for answering so many so far. Chairwoman Anthony asked a lot of what I was going to, so that's terrific. You mentioned some of the current plans that already exist. I would love to hear your thoughts on like the current plans that the last administration or prior administrations did, and where you see the role of the current planning department in implementing versus starting over on some of those. Specifically, I'm most interested in the climate justice plan and the bike ped mobility plans. I would love to hear your thoughts on how you plan to implement those for focus.
Yeah, I think, some of the planning efforts are relatively fresh out of the box, and, I don't think they need to be walked around town again and redone. Some of them might have been done prior to COVID or prior to kind of some of the economic resetting that we had. I think they could always deserve a refresh. I think by virtue of the comprehensive plan, part of that planning process will be reminding folks about when we're in the individual neighborhoods and communities or in their districts, reminding people about the past work that's been done. And I think there'll be that natural iteration of a refresh, if you will, or taking a new, fresh perspective on it. We talked about planning initiatives. When I mentioned that had been working in Lynn, that had been the planning department, they were still doing planning, right?
Mhm.
The EDIC or another agency would do a planning initiative, and they take that plan and go on a shelf. And
Yeah.
it was excitement at the beginning, and then people look around, what happened to that plan?
Yeah.
And so my first task there was to really take all those plans and open them up and review them all. And what you'll find in a lot of planning is that the recommendations, there's always a page of recommendations of 10 or 20. You line those all up, and you'll see that across the board, there's a shared priority that is similar in every neighborhood. And they're typically around housing or safety or connectivity and mobility. And what we did is let's take the top 10, let's look at them, and let's start saying, how do we prioritize these, and what can we pick off right now? I want to show, I think the best way to demonstrate to a community that they're being listened to is to take one of their planning concepts and initiating it very quickly, an early action item, might be modest, might be painting a crosswalk or, revising, modifying an intersection, or in the case we did is a lot of stuff in the arts and cultural realm. You get a few quick early action items, then again, take a look at those medium-term initiatives that we can start gathering steam and say, okay, this is something that we'll want to have in years 2 to 3 or 4. And then I think it is our obligation, if there is a bold vision that could take decades or more to initiate that. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first footstep, right? So let's take that first step. Let's move in that direction, because that is, I think, the respectful and responsible response to all that energy and effort that's expended during these processes within the community and the expectations that are established among the residents.
Have you started that process of opening up the existing plans to find those areas of commonality for the existing plans we have here in Providence?
Yes, in the crossover, to your earlier question, do involve, where some of those plans touch all the neighborhoods, are in this connectivity and transportation. And, with varying levels of reception, we work with the multimodal pathway connections. I find the ones that are ones that also integrate resiliency. So the Winneskatucket plan, which is adjacent to a really important natural resource, and also traverses an area which has a lot of new planning and development and implementation is occurring, specifically farm fresh in the area around Cincinnati. But it also houses very traditional heavy industries. And just last week, we went down and walked through Capco Steel to meet with their owners and understand their process and their transportation and circulation needs to make sure that there was no negative impact with the Winneskatucket plan. They were delighted that we took the time to go meet with them and identify their specific concerns. And they also mentioned that was the first time anybody ever come down and talk to them. So I think getting out of the office, getting members of the staff to go someplace, go look at it, walk around, talk to the people, talk to business owners, talk to folks who might not be familiar with the planning activity or need a refresher, need to be re-engaged. Those are the ways that you're going to effectuate a good design, and not to kind of lock yourself in the office and drop things down from a helicopter. Right? You roll up your sleeves, get out there, and again, meet the folks where they are.
Oh, please.
And do you have experience like from the other from Massachusetts in like that straddle between city-owned assets and either state or federally owned assets? And I'm particularly thinking about North Main Street, which is a RIDOT-owned street that has a lot of potential and also a lot of traffic fatalities. And I would love to hear if you have that kind of experience, because there's a really great vision for North Main. A lot of neighbors excited about what the future of it could hold economically as a wonderful corridor for walking. There's a beautiful park / cemetery there. But the RIDOT ownership has been a challenge.
Yeah, and the good fortune to recently lead a state transportation agency that had lots of impact in many cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth. And that group that I was in, the TOD group, was really a startup within a transportation agency. I found that transportation agencies, I would exclude the Rhode Island DOT, because I've been in a couple of meetings with them. They are very responsive, very good in terms of engaging the community, particularly the work they're doing around here. Not always the case, but I think in developing those relationships with other agencies outside of the municipality is of critical point. So if there's not engagement, there's not a relationship building, then you're not going to get the desired results that you want. My experience with the MBTA, again, that they had not had that capacity in the past, and part of my responsibility was engaging with the local communities. I find that the local communities do know what's best for them, and to find ways to bridge that relationship between local control and local knowledge versus a wider infrastructure requirement. You know, if you're moving tens of thousands of people a day, you have to look at the world slightly different perspective. But where those touch points occur in the municipality or in the locality, you have to do an extra effort to reach out and have that dialogue and that engagement so that you get those details right, that they work best, not only for state and interstate transportation needs, but also for those local authorities.
Just, my final question, okay, is, a number of us have been on council, have been talking about self-storage facilities, and there's a new self-storage, 11-acre self-storage facility now being proposed for Councilor Sanchez's board. What is your perspective on whether those types of facilities should be allowed by right in the zoning code?
I think the one you're talking to is allowed. by-
Yeah, they're all allowed by right in two zoning districts right now, yeah.
You know, like all things in planning and zoning and development, I think everything's very site specific, and in many instances, that type of use is welcome. The market is demanding it. In that, in some instances, it's a less intensive use, and that might be desirable. In other locations, it might be considered a lost opportunity. So I think you really have to take those on a case-by-case basis, but if there's a concern with that type of use, then certainly something that if it warrants a desire to be considered in zoning, and that's something that, you know, we should all roll up our sleeves and not look at.
Okay. Council.
Thank you. Thank you for answering all the questions as I was listening. Just have a couple. Can you just reiterate again, what's the Mayor Brett Smiley's vision for our capital city?
He wants it to be the best run city in America. And I think that is a admirable goal, and I think he's well on his way to realizing that.
And from your perspective, in terms of planning, developing, now that you've had the opportunity to say, hey, yeah, I'm gonna go and apply for this, now you've been on the job for about a month or so. So you've analyzed pretty much
I know everything.
you know
I know all the
everything.
answers.
You know, you've toured neighborhoods in the city, because it's small enough.
Yeah.
And coming from a small city like Lynn and also Boston, Lynn is about what, about 125,000?
100, yeah.
And we're about 190. What do you think is, now that you've had this opportunity to see it, analyze it, be a professional, what is how do you intend to enhance that quality of life for people here and also fit in within the mayor's 4 years from now? How do you see it? What would you think you will accomplish? What are the low-hanging fruits? Besides, you know, what you just described earlier in terms of the green, you know, and neighborhoods.
Well, that's an ambitious question. But I think where the opportunities lie, the health and success of any city is going to be determined by the quality of life within its neighborhoods. And to get out into your districts and to learn more about them and to hear about your concerns and what your constituents are telling you is probably my most important thing I can do now. And I welcome the opportunity to come out and meet with you and walk your districts and learn more about your priorities. The comprehensive plan, by virtue of its, you know, all-encompassing nature, is going to inform many of those priorities as well. I think all the neighborhoods have very different flavors and very different kind of personalities to them. So each one is going to have a very specific and different need that is only going to be found in common ground by the connections and their adjacencies. So I think all neighborhoods have, again, very similar concerns, but that need to be tailored specifically for their location and for their stakeholders and their constituents. So I'm hoping that, if you ask the question, what I hope to see in 4 years, I hope that we have a lot of new housing starts. We have a lot of new permits being pulled from inspectional services, that we come across intersections or nodes that have been improved, not only improving circulation, but many of those nodes will contain little central business districts, that those storefronts are occupied and that there's businesses occurring in them. And if they're not occupied, that those storefronts maybe have some type of art display or something in them, so they don't look like they're a place that you should avoid, but that a place of someone interest. Until I find that some of the challenges with property are usually based on the landlord themselves rather than other larger economic forces. So working with those owners, finding strategies to enhance those specific areas. And I think also larger broad-based approaches of beautification, other strategies we can bring just to have a general better look and feel to the place as we see what I hope with more construction activity and more starts, as well as working through those other planning initiatives that are identified by the residents.
Thank you. It's again, going along the line that you come from Boston, you've seen already how the housing stock is, and you just addressed, what the 4 years could look like. What are your thoughts in terms of the TSAs, in terms of bringing in investors, to grow these housing, but also development? What are your experience and your thought in terms of TSAs here?
I think you got to be careful with them. You have to scrutinize each one individually on its merits. As a whole, the tax stabilization and other tax benefits are another tool in your toolbox in order to move a project from conception to a green light to go. They typically need more than just a TSA. They also need some other types of subsidy or contribution. I think they need to be, if they have been given, or if they are to be distributed, that there needs to be some compliance associated with that, enforcement, that it's not kind of a blank check in which it's just given and then forgotten. They have to be reviewed and scrutinized, but as a tool for development, they are a critical component in many ways, particularly in this economy.
And in reference to that, in terms of having those as a tool, what are your thoughts in terms of holding the developers and within those TSAs or other resources that they may need for more affordable housing? Do you have any thoughts in terms of, have you all experienced working with developers to that extent, so that affordable housing can be in place in areas that pretty much like in downtown or other affluent areas, that they could also share the part of the affordable housing units? Have you had any experience with that?
Yes, yeah. And
how did you, can you just elaborate on that? How did that turn out? Thank you. Yeah.
so I'll use the example of Lynn. Where I resided for the 4 years, I was within the Lynn Housing Authority, so a lot of opportunities to see how they operate and how they function. And they were a community that had not had much, if any, development occurring. So a lot of it was, infill and around, but nothing of substance. And at the same time, the economy had kind of caught up to them. They were within the range of the Section 8 vouchers of Boston. So there were a lot of folks who were leaving Boston proper with a voucher would get them a studio apartment. The further you go out, you get more real estate, you get 2 bedrooms. So a lot of families were leaving Boston, coming out to this community. So I think the voucher program was successful in that. And As they begin to kind of move forward in getting larger scale development attraction, they were trying to find mechanisms to respond to the concerns of displacement and affordability, and began a process of requiring contributions to an affordable housing fund, as a starter, kind of prorated to the size of the development. And then it began the process of looking at an inclusionary zoning process, which has now come to fruition in that community. So as the market conditions and the market concerns begin to affect overall development, you will start to see the strategies begin to evolve within the municipality to have a more comprehensive approach to housing and sustaining affordable programs and replenishing, making sure there's contributions and that carries on. But at this point, we've got to make sure that those strategies don't constrain the very thin margins and the very difficult financing that we're experiencing right now. So it's one of these things that has to be kind of nurtured and developed as that economy, that capacity grows. So it's very kind of, you don't want to get too far ahead of that complex ecosystem that requires actually get the units built themselves.
And just two more. Then the next one is in terms of the technology. How you had an experience with that? What do you see our capital city evolving with the technological use in the planning phases and analysis to enhance the quality of life of people? And then my second one is, I thought I heard something that you were looking, or as you were analyzing the houses that go on here. Are you moving to Providence?
I'm a resident of Providence right now.
Excellent. See, that was an easy one. You got that one right.
It's an awesome town.
Yeah.
Constituent of Ward 1, right?
We're wonderful, I call it.
There you go. So the other one is just pretty much the technology piece of it. Yeah.
In terms of like technology being brought to bear to the planning and development process?
Yeah, and also as you're looking at and analyzing your whole plan.
Yeah, one of the good opportunities now, and what's nice about being up at planning development is that there is the staff are excellent. They're knowledgeable, they're professional, and they have long-term commitments to the community. One of the things we're working on right now is geographic information systems. It's a kind of a platform, a technological platform, and we're working on what's called a digital twin, which will be modeling the city in 3 dimensions in a digital form that we'll be able to use to analyze not only existing conditions, but to represent potentials for future growth and to understand the dynamics of how that relates in a real world context. So availing ourselves of kind of the latest, all without buying a new platform, is all being done, in a formal way. It sounds ambitious, and but what we have is also identified that GIS platform is being used by other departments, and fortunately it is on the same platform, and we're going to do a working group so that we have cross collaboration between the different groups. So I think even the public safety agencies utilize it. We can use it for land use records documentation, and then we can also use it for our visioning process by creating layers in which you could implement or manipulate and turn on and off depending on what you want to view and how you want to use that data and that visioning. So very excited about that. We're looking in terms of technology, also continuing it with the staff. So making sure they're out to learn more about what's at the cutting edge of planning and development and design as well. So we're very excited about those opportunities.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you so much for being willing to serve in this capacity. So how are you learning about the nuances and histories of each neighborhood? And the reason why I say histories is because there are neighborhoods who have experienced harm over time as a result of perhaps growth and development, and there are people being priced out of the city constantly. And what will you do to ensure that you have a deep understanding of each neighborhood and its nuances?
That, that's a lifelong learning lesson, and it's something I want to and need to learn more about, and I respect that and I appreciate that. You know, I'm just the other day, I went way back. I went over to the Athenaeum and I pulled the book on Roger Williams. You know, I'll go back to the written documentation, and there's obviously more prior to that. And cities have the history, and in many ways, you know, the city's prosperity was based on issues that are still being born today and brought to bear. And to learn more about that and hear more about that from the people who live here and the people who experience it is of critical importance. And I think being out in your neighborhoods and learning more and hearing, and sometimes, although I do have a propensity to talk, I do know when to be quiet and listen and to hear those stories and hear those truths. And that is going to inform what you do as you move forward, particularly I'm hearing now in some communities that feel that they are sharing a disproportionate burden of some of the obligations and responsibilities that affect the reality of the city today, that have lost opportunities through not being listened to or heard in the past, and not being able to join in the prosperity that the city might be experiencing in other situations and capacities. So how do we bring everybody along for the journey, for the ride, to hear their story, and to be proactive in it? And we talk a lot about what we've got for when we're sourcing goods and materials, to make sure that we look at women, minority-owned businesses, that when there's workforce opportunities, that we engage with those communities to make sure that they have access to either knowledge of the activities that are occurring or certifications, and moving them into workforce training opportunities, finding pathways to prosperity through early actions. I think is going to help elevate these communities and make them feel that they're part of, connected to this community, to the city, and that they take ownership and responsibility. And I find when you feel you are part of that city story in a healthy, positive way, you will contribute more to it, and you will take care of that place, and you'll make that a better place, not only for you and the community, but for the city as a whole.
Thank you for sharing. And I would venture to say that every single person at this table has a lot of institutional knowledge about their communities. Each of you are experts in your community, and you know, me personally, having grown up in my community, seeing the changes and the dynamics over time. So I would certainly leverage the expertise of the people at this table. And with that being said, how will you manage any disagreement between the city administration and the local council member who's on the ground and really understands the nuances of their local community?
Ooh, that is, you know, obviously each issue is tailor specific, right? So there is a balance that we have to find between the specific concerns of the constituents and the overall well-being of the city. I'll take my cues from the mayor and his priorities and his leadership, and find ways to modulate and moderate those specific issues. Certainly not ignore them and not listen to them, but to find ways. I think in many ways we're contention or conflict might seem to be writ large. If you get down into the details, there are frequently small gestures or small maneuvers that you can make that find common ground, and I'd always look for those first. But it is a delicate balance between planning and moving the city as a whole, but making sure that we find time to understand the specific issues of the individuals and the neighborhoods in general.
And I love your philosophy about meeting people where they are. I think that's just so critically important. How would you define your approach or philosophy more broadly? Would you say it's a more top-down approach, bottom-up approach? Do you have an approach? Is there a philosophy that you would go by in your planning and development process?
I think it starts, even in the way that I manage the office, and I had this conversation with folks. I go, we're all on one floor here, yet I'm getting emails from somebody who's down the hall, and I admonished them. I said, get up off your chair, come over, knock on my door, or let me know that you have a question if I pass in the hallway. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it. I think technology can be a filter between people and a barrier. My favorite activities have been prior to this position, but also while being here is I'm just out walking around. That's how I got that apartment. I was just walking down. I saw a guy outside. I started a conversation with him. Next thing you know, I got a place to live. So being out there, engaging people, walking around. I'm a tireless walker. I also like these electric scooter things. I don't know people that think about, but I've seen a lot of progress by getting on some of the mobility equipment that's around here to zip around and see things. I've been out in all the neighborhoods. I like to find out where the best restaurants are in the communities. I like to find out where the attractions are. I'm a history buff, so each of these neighborhoods has a story to tell. My training in architecture, I look at the buildings, I look at the forms, I look at the shape, I look at the commercial corridors, and all that informs kind of my appreciation and my desire to learn more about these neighborhoods and people that are in.
And two quick things that are going to be
Okay,
coupled
because we are
together.
running up against your.
Yeah, I know. So
And we have some more.
yeah, we got a ton there. So what's your opinion briefly on expanding notifications on minor land developments? And the second part of that question is, how do you see yourself incentivizing development via TSAs or TIFs, and what's your opinion on those?
The notification on the first question
On minor land developments?
The position also has within its purview multiple boards and commissions that I think affect planning and development throughout all the neighborhoods. From what I understand, COVID facilitated expediting that technological capacity, whether through teleconferencing. We want to keep that, and we're using it here. I want to make sure that folks, I found that teleconferencing has also brought constituents to giving them voice to those who would not ordinarily participate otherwise, notwithstanding any other health issues or other things that happen. So we're going to not phase that out. We're going to maintain the technological capacity. I think through the comprehensive planning process, our planners will be out more in the neighborhood. So we'll have strengthening the relationships between the community members and the planning staff so that people know names and faces and have the ability to reach out and contact them. I've told the staff that my perspective of government is that we're in the service business. We're not in we're not only kind of regulatory or punitive capacity, that we're here to serve, and we should facilitate the needs and wishes and desires of the constituencies, that we should be open and transparent without secret business, that we should make sure that what we have for resources that are available should be widely promoted, because I think some of the best opportunities for infill development are within small businesses that are already within the community. people who want to scale up from maybe working on renovations to maybe get their first full build of a one-family or two-family or three-family house. Who work with developers and developers of color or from the community who need maybe additional working through the process to understand the zoning process, which can be complicated. You know, does this use fit this location? I think we can do that graphically to simplifying the permitting process so that once that development and that coaching and cajoling happens along the way, that then they could be pointed to the permitting process and walk through that. So it doesn't seem so intimidating that people just throw down their hands and say, I'm not going to get involved, because without that, you're not building additional capacity within the communities, you're not building wealth, you're not building intergenerational opportunities. So I think we're obligated to do that.
Councilor Graves.
A question and a comment. Were you part of the Roxbury initiative? How far back are we going with the Roxbury thing?
I was somewhere after the Dudley Square Neighborhood Initiative, which they actually was a community group that were given the police powers of eminent domain. They had a land bank. Their planning segued into kind of a handshake to the planning that I was undertaking, and that Roxbury Master Planning Oversight Committee was a subsidiary of a larger planning group within Roxbury. It was specific to Dudley Square, which is now William Square. So, and I was plugged into kind of a longer term process, and then moved from that planning initiative into that implementation phase. So spent quite a bit of time in that community, not only on that work in Dudley Square, but throughout the community, get to that capital planning initiative to make sure that all the city's resources and planning touch every neighborhood in a way that everybody got piece of the pie, piece of the action. It was pretty important.
Okay, I may have met you then. No, my aunt was part of that, the Browns.
Oh, really? Okay, great.
Yeah, and I marched with my sign. Don't jump on me. So I think I met you, but you weren't in the film that they made. I don't remember you being in there.
I'm not sure. I spent a lot of time there. There's a lot of little things that were prepared after that, but the work continues on that community.
I just left there last week. It's beautiful stuff.
Yeah, and I know they have now kind of turned the corner where they're prior they had been clamoring for more development, more attention after 30 or 40 years, and they're now trying to find ways to control the development because it's coming at them so quickly.
It has exploded. So I have to say, if you were a part of it, I know at the beginning it was a lot of tension between the community, the mayor, and those departments, and how we all came together and were able to do it. So I give you kudos for that, because it took a lot of work and a lot of humbling on both sides.
So that's an understatement.
Okay, one final. I just want to know how accessible will you be to city council members, and how are we going to make sure we're heard and listened to?
I learned from you. You're the subject matter experts, and I look forward to getting out. I want to walk your neighborhoods. I want to walk your communities. I want to meet your community groups, and I want to understand what your priorities are so that we can help inform not only our planning, but how we get to real concrete results.
Thank you.
One short thing. No, real short, no, just comment, not a question. No comment, not a question. This is my 5th year, well, 2nd term as councilman, and being on the finance committee. And I want to say thank you for taking this position seriously, because no director has come in and said that they moved to the city in my 4 or 5, I don't even remember anybody, that before they were even confirmed, they said, well, I'm taking it serious, and I moved to the city, so I would like to thank you for that. It's,
The city's a joy.
Right.
It is.
you don't have to live in the city, no, they did away with the residents. She did, but she was already here before I'm saying someone outside that moved in to the city, so
Okay,
that's it. I'd like to make the motion to approve.
okay. Is there a second? Okay, I have a motion to approve made by Councilor Taylor, seconded by Councilor Pichardo. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
All abstain? Then the ayes have it. We'll be passing this with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
support. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we are going to move through this very quickly. Item number 3.
Item number 3, resolution authorizing approval of the following contract award by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with section 21-26B1 and 2. Greenlee Mountain Fire apparatus, $550,000 by fire department.
Okay, and who do we have here presenting this evening?
Madam Chair, myself, Chief Silver, and we have support from our staff.
Okay, I'm going to swear the two of you in. Thank you.
Please raise your right hands. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And please state your names for the records.
Lawrence Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, City of Providence. Derek Silver, Chief of Fire Department.
Which chief would like to start?
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'll take the lead, and then the bulk of this will be answered by Chief Silver, given his complete knowledge of the department. The matter before you this evening, Madam Chair, has appeared on the Board of Contract agenda. It was referred by proper standards to this meeting by your internal order, given that it was a sole source item, unique source, as I would like to refer to, and the matter was over 500,000. Chief Silver will attest that the reason why this made perfect sense is that given the notion that the supply chain delay, long lead time of the essence, and the age of the fleet are critical matters in this particular purchase. And with his competent staff, they identified the availability of two, I would use the term slightly gently used in his industry, and he can speak to that more specifically, but at a price that is well within the standard of bargain to buy these machines, these equipment, these trucks, brand new will be upwards of $2 million, and the lead time will be in excess of 12 to 16 months. They are readily available at a price of $275,000 each for a total of $550,000. I think the chief will test that while their mileage may be just under 100,000, it's the equipment use, the pump hours are well within the standard, below standard of use and maintenance. And with that, Madam Chair,
Chief, do you have a handout that you wanted to?
I do, Chair.
Okay, I would like the handout, and then can we mark that as exhibit 1 and have a motion?
So,
Motion made by Councilor Anderbaugh, seconded by Councilor Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee, councilors. So as the Chief Financial Officer stated, we are requesting the approval to purchase 2 used fire apparatus. These will replace engine 8 and engine 2, which are 23 and 21 years old respectively. Mileage on engine 8 is indiscernible. The odometer is broken, so I can't tell you what the mileage is. The hours on the current engine 8 are 68,000. To put that in perspective, on a diesel motor, which is how fire apparatus are driven, the mileage itself isn't really an issue, it's the hours. In the mechanic world, they use a multiplier of 60. So you take the hours of use, multiply that by 60 to give kind of the mileage wear and tear that we're all used to. That puts that truck upwards of 2 million miles on that apparatus. What had happened about 9 months ago is all of our apparatus go through routine printer maintenance and inspections, and these 2 identified to have significant corrosion on the frames, which makes them really, their useful life come to an end now. There's not a specific date in which fire trucks expire, but the industry standard is 15 years frontline, 10 years in reserve, for a total life of 25 years. And that's when we generally discharge. Providence, because of our repair division, because we do our work in-house, and they do really magical work, we're able to get 20 to 25 years in frontline service of our apparatus. But now we're at 23 to 21 years. As the CFO had mentioned, we did look at buying brand new apparatus. We had purchased, with the approval of the council, 9 fire apparatus in early 2020, I'm sorry, late 2020, August of 2020. Those trucks took about 11 months to show up. And those engines at the time were $450,000 a piece. Now, COVID, those apparatus, the same fire truck is costing us $700,000. So for us to buy the same 2 used that are brand new, but 2 replacements would cost us right around 1.4 million. These 2 used apparatus would cost us $550,000. In the handouts, you'll see the first one identifies the 2 trucks that are most in need, which are the ones we're talking about today, engine 8 and engine 2. The 14s and engine 11, some years later would need to be replaced, ladder 2, and then what we're determining as the intermediate needs in the future. Behind that, you'll see we just went to our vendor and asked them if we were to purchase a brand new fire apparatus now, what would that cost? And that is the $650,000 document you see right behind it. And the one right behind that is what we paid for those fire apparatus in 2020, and that's when we paid $450. So it went from $450 to $650 in 2 years. And now today it's actually about $700,000. And behind that is about 7 different apparatus that during this 9 months that we've searched and found the 2 used ones that we're requesting today, 7 other used apparatus, just to show you that while these are used, and while it is still $500,000, we took that use of that resource request seriously and did our due diligence and looked for other used apparatus. And the 7 others that are similar are older, more expensive, more mileage, more hours. And so these really are the 2 diamonds in the rough.
So I'm going to say thank you for sharing with us your, this is very good. You know, I appreciate you sharing with us the information you gathered on the used equipment, because obviously you've done a lot of due diligence on this issue. I guess my question is, so how many years do you think you'll get out of these 2 new, new used pieces of equipment?
I think realistically another decade. What we're going to do, which is something we did probably 20, 30 years ago in Providence, we haven't done it as of late, but in the capital budget, we also have requested 2 other engines. And so what my plan would be with these 2 is to really cycle into the lower run volume apparatus to keep them in service longer. So while some of the manufactured firefighters might not like getting a shiny truck, to keep these trucks in the lower call volume engines, getting their life expectancy a little longer. So a decade, I'm very comfortable with saying that another 10 years out of these trucks is absolutely doable.
Wonderful. Questions? Yes, Chief Taylor.
Of course, the finance would have the questions. People upset out of 5 of these, 3 of them are in Ward 8. What's going on over there? But no, I just wanted to follow up and reiterate that I did talk to George from the shop, because I was concerned in the beginning about mileage. And he said not to worry about it because he has 2 brand new rebuilt PS engines over there. So if the engine does go, say 5 years down the road, you get a brand new motor, they can just put it. They must have took out of it. So I just wanted to mention that as far as how long it will last. But also on this, do we have a plan? I know you came through a plan before to replace them. Are we going to be down every plan to?
Yes, sir. If you look at the bottom, there's a little footnote about replacement schedule. And if we were to adhere to it, effectively, you would get to that average age of 15, 17 years of frontline service and then replace them as needed. That large purchase we did in 2020 really got us ahead of the curve. And that was a few grand.
This is an example why I push for fire chief, because
Yeah.
to give this plan, I just want to, reiterate that on the record that we didn't have that for 8 years, so I just.
We didn't know what your opinion was.
I know. We got some new people. They might saw it on TV, but I saw it on.
All right, Councilor.
I just wanted to say, Chief, thank you. And this is so complete, and what you sent us ahead of time is also really complete, and I just really appreciate the due diligence that's so obvious that you did on this, and it's like way more complete than most things we get, and so I just wanted to thank you for that. And as a very small personal aside, I recently had to call the fire department for a neighbor who wasn't home and their alarm was going off, and I swear you guys, like, I don't know if you like, I don't know how you got there, but it was like 30 seconds, and I was like, I don't know how they physically did this, coming from where I know they came from, just like totally confident, just shut up and like, literally like the walk from my house to 2 houses down, you were already there, and I don't know how you did that, so thank you.
I'm gonna check on your speed now.
No, it was like calm coming down Hope Street, it was great, but I was like, I don't know how it happened.
Councilor Pichardo.
I watched Chicago Fire.
Time tonight?
There you
No.
go. And speaking a lot with the chief here, just a quick question in terms of, being used, does it matter where they actually, their history and also where they serve?
Absolutely, so
And
obviously a
do
lot of
you have
our,
the history of that?
these are from Alabama.
Okay.
It's a volunteer fire department, so they do have high mileage, but that's about it. There's not a lot of hours on them, they don't use them a lot. So as an example, where our trucks might have less mileage on them because they're going short distances, the hours are incredible.
Yeah.
So as an example with our engine 8, effectively engine 8 was if you turned it on 13 years ago and left it running, it's been running straight for 13 years straight in the amount of hours on engine 8. But yeah, we absolutely take that into account. We try to find them in the southern area of the country, no road salt, which is really the killer of them in general. But yeah, we do absolutely take that into account.
And this is-
Go right ahead.
so as part of like when you get them, any truck or even used, are they prepared like with undercoating to protect them with weird weather here in Rhode Island?
They put a rubberized coating in it. I mean, it does help slow down the corrosion, but at the end of the day, it works its way in there. They drop into a C channel at the frame, and then there's a rubber coating and there's another C channel. So what happens inevitably is water gets in there, salt gets in there, and that's how it rots from the inside out. But these trucks will be inspected in person by our superintendent of repair to ensure before we make any finalized purchase that these are okay, but we don't have any doubts that they will fit.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Have a motion.
Make motion to approve.
Okay, motion made by Councilor Taylor, seconded by Councilor Vanderwall, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion? Yes, have a motion.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn was made by Councilor Pichardo, seconded by Councilor Taylor, all in favor?
Huh?